The story of the Giant's Causeway. In the far north of Ireland, at the edge of the sea in Antrim, stands the Giant's Causeway. Raised above the level of the water and formed by 40,000 stone pillars, it's an extraordinary sight. The tallest of the columns is 40 metres high. Most are 6,000, but others have 4 to 8,000, and all are flat topped. When visitors arrive, they cannot resist walking on this unique road. All the old stories say that the Causeway was the work of Fiann MacCool, who was leader of the band of warriors called the Fianna. Fiann was famous for his strength and bravery. It seems he was also gigantic. His stone boot, left on one of the pillars, shows he was at least 27 metres tall. But most of all, Fiann was famous for his wisdom, for he had tasted the salmon of knowledge and knew everything. Well, almost everything, for when it came to love, he was quite foolish. Fiann was living on the coast of Antrim and was married to a perfectly fine, reliable woman called Una. He thought she was a lot smaller than him, for he looked down on her a bit and used to daydream of meeting a lady who could look him straight in the eye. Then one bright and sunny day, as he was staring out to sea, he saw on the cliffs of Scaffa, an island of Scotland, a beautiful lady giant. She took his breath away with her width, her height, her flashing eye. Fiann waved at her and she waved back. Encouraged, he waved twice as vigorously and jumped up and down. The lady giant did the same. At this, Fiann lost her head entirely and roared across the water, "Come here to me at once." Well, the lady giant was a bit keen on swimming over and getting herself soaked through, and she indicated as much. "Don't worry, I'll fix everything," Fiann yelled, and he lifted huge stones and flung them into the water to make a causeway, so his new beloved wouldn't get her huge feet wet. But before it was finished, he saw to his maid that the lady giant had disappeared. For while she wasn't against waving across the sea and jumping up and down in a friendly manner, she was none too keen on having huge stones hurled in her direction by a strange gigantic man. And anyway, she had her own husband giant at home. That's one story about how Fiann made the Giant's Causeway, but there is another story, one that's more popular with people who love tales about fighting and smart planning, and wives who are worth their weight in gold. One day, as Fiann was staring across the sea looking for something to do, he saw on the coast of Scotland an extremely ugly giant who was broader and taller and bigger all round than he was himself. "I like a challenge," Fiann mused. "My life is very boring at the minute with none of the Fianna here and Una wanting me to do domestic things, like turning the house right round to face the sea." He took another look at the Scottish giant. "I've never seen anyone as ugly. How many eyebrows does the fellow have? His arms are like huge trees. I'd say he'd be a good fighter, though." With that, Fiann began hurling insults across the sea. "Hey you, tiny, bristlebrows, coward!" The Scottish giant was raging. "Get my name right," he roared. "I'm Benandona, the biggest giant on the face of the earth. No one calls me tiny and gets away with it. If I could swim, I'd be over there to pulverise you." "Don't let a drop of water stop me," Fiann yelled back, delighted at the prospect of a proper fight. "I'll make a bridge you can cross." With that, he lifted a great clump of earth and hurled it towards Scotland. It dropped mile short and was later known as the Isle of Man. The hole it left in the ground, filled with water, is called Loch Ness to this day. Fiann then lifted huge pillar-like stones and flung them over one by one until they formed a causeway Benandona could cross. But at this stage he was feeling very tired, while the Scottish giant was fresh and still raging. Benandona strode across, ready to demolish his enemy. The closer he got, the more enormous he seemed. Fiann's wisdom got the better of his desire for battle. "I'm exhausted," he thought, "and in no fit state to fight. He'll destroy me." He turned on his heel and made for home, where he explained the situation to Una. "Right," his fine, reliable wife said as she draped a white cloth over the very large bathtub. "Get in here." "Why?" "Because I'm going to disguise you as a baby, and this is the crib." Now, Fiann trusted his wife, and since he could hear Benandona's large feet pounding towards the house, he put up no argument. Una tucked him into the bathtub with a blanket, put a bonnet on his head and tied the ribbon under his chin. "He makes a dreadful looking baby," she thought, "truly shocking," but she hoped for the best. "Best pretend to be asleep," she said. Just then the door burst open and Benandona had to stoop to squeeze himself into the house. "Where's that fellow who was so free with his insults?" he roared. "Shush! Hush at once! You'll wake the baby." Is it Fionn McCool you mean? He's gone off hunting. Well, I'll wait. Ben and Donna tried to whisper, but it was like the rumble of a threatening volcano. He stared at the bathtub. That's a huge baby. I've never seen the like. Fion's child, Una said proudly. Takes after his father for strength. Do you know, if there was a strong baby competition, this one would win it. Ben and Donna looked less sure of himself. After all, if this was the child, the father must be colossal altogether. On the coast of Scotland, he hadn't looked huge. The distance must have made him look much smaller. Maybe a fight wasn't such a good idea. Losing would be very painful. But just as he was thinking of going, Una said, You're a fine, massive fellow. I bet you can do really strong things. I can, Ben and Donna puffed with pride. Give me any test of strength and I'll pass it. Una pretended to think. At last she said, I bet you couldn't lift this house up and turn it around so the front is facing the sea. I bet I could, said Ben and Donna. He went outside and wrapped his arms around the large stone house. He puffed with exertion as he heaved the building up from the ground and staggered about in a circle till it was properly facing the sea. Well done, said Una. Come inside and have a bite to eat. You must be tired out. Not at all, said the giant, but his legs were very wobbly and he staggered into the house. Una prepared a large steak, but while he wasn't looking, she painted a big flat stone to look like a magnificent piece of meat. At this stage, Ben and Donna was nearly nodding off with tiredness, and without much examination, he bit into what he thought was fine beef. Ah! Two of his huge front teeth broke, and he was fully awake again. What's the matter? Una said as she tossed the real steak over to the so-called baby, who ate it in 3 bites. Ben and Donna was astounded. If that infant can eat something that breaks my teeth, he thought, his father must be very strong altogether. And I don't think I want to meet him. So he turned to Una and said, I have to go now. They'll be looking for me at home. It was lovely having you visit, Una told him. It's a pity you missed Fionn. You must come again when he's here, but at least say goodbye to the baby before you go. Ben and Donna wasn't much good with babies, but he was very keen to leave, and knew he'd never get away from a mother without admiring her child first. A fine baby, he said without much sincerity. In fact, he thought it was a brute of a baby. It's great he could gobble that steak. Ah, that's because he has a few small teeth. Put your finger in his mouth, gently now, and you'll feel them at the edge of his gums. Ben and Donna did so, curious. With a sudden snap of his jaw, the baby bit off his finger. Howling with pain, Ben and Donna pushed through the door without a word of goodbye, rushed down to the sea and ran all the way across the causeway, tearing up most of the stones behind him with his good hand, so he wouldn't be followed by the terrible infant's more terrible father. And what he left of the causeway remains to this day. Geologists believe it all happened differently. They say that 65 million years ago a volcano erupted. A flow of lava rose through a chalky bed, then met the icy water. As the lava cooled, it cracked and snapped to form all the columns that are the Giant's Causeway. Science or legend? Which is closest to the truth? Maybe the stories are. After all, Fionn's boot's still there, a witness to the past. The end. Don't forget to like and subscribe and press the wee bell notification. And a huge big thank you to all my subscribers and patrons. See you next week. Bye bye.